The morning fog draped Vallon Harbor like a velvet curtain, dense and quiet, absorbing the sound of distant waves and clinking metal. Captain Eliza Monroe guided her 26-foot cutter, Ocean Trace, toward the edge of Dock 4 with practiced hands. The vessel bore no insignia, no military markings. Just her name, stenciled in modest pale lettering on the stern. Eliza wore a dark windbreaker zipped to the collar, her expression unreadable as the dock creaked beneath the bow's approach. At 44, she had spent 2 decades navigating the brutal meritocracy of Naval Systems Command. She had no interest in medals or ceremony. What she cared about were systems, what worked, what failed under pressure, and how people revealed their true nature when no one was watching. This morning's mission was one of quiet importance. A live test of the new novice autonomous navigation system, run without media, without political interference, and without brass breathing down her neck for credit. She had filed the authorization herself at exactly 0400 hours, deep in the encrypted logs, traceable only by those who knew where to look. It was the kind of test that demanded absolute control, complete discretion. Ocean Trace moved like a whisper across the water, her engine cut to idle as momentum carried her into place. Eliza stepped onto the dock with mechanical grace, securing lines, adjusting fenders, checking novice one last time. The screen glowed blue, data logged, course adjusted, every system humming in perfect rhythm. She allowed herself one deep breath, salt and machine oil filling her lungs, as the sun cracked the horizon in a single orange blade. Then she heard it, boots on planks. 2 figures emerged from the harbor patrol shed. Officer Grant Nolan sipped from a paper cup, steam rising in the cold air. His partner, Officer Jake Mercer, tugged at the zipper of his jacket, already watching her with narrowed eyes. "Looks like someone's lost," Mercer muttered. Nolan nodded toward Ocean Trace. Too small, too quiet, no signal, no clearance on file. They moved toward her with casual authority, the kind that did not question itself. Neither checked the dock assignment. Neither asked for system verification. In their eyes, Dock 4 was their turf, and Eliza Monroe, whoever she was, did not belong. She turned to face them, still and composed. "Ma'am," Nolan said sharply, "this is a restricted dock. Identification now." Eliza studied their stances. Mercer's hand hovered near his belt, not on the weapon, but close enough. Their tone was confrontational, their posture rigid. She had faced insurgents in high-pressure war zones with more discipline than this. "My authorization is embedded in the system log," she said calmly. "Filed this morning at 0400 hours. Mercer scoffed. "System log, huh? Lady, this isn't some rental pier. Dock 4 is military restricted. You're trespassing." Nolan stepped closer. "What's your name?" Without flinching, Eliza reached for her leather satchel. The second her hand moved, Nolan's voice snapped like a whip. "Don't move." She froze, then slowly lifted the satchel by its strap and unfastened the flap. Inside, her official Navy identification lay exactly where it should, clean, clipped, and properly aligned. She handed it over with steady hands. Nolan barely glanced at it before tossing it onto the dock with a sneer. "Fake," he muttered. "You're claiming to be commander of what? Novice? In that floating toaster?" The ID landed face up, its seal glinting in the light. Anyone who cared to inspect it would see the holographic emblem, the correct formatting, and the face that matched the woman before them. But Nolan and Mercer weren't looking. They had already made their judgment. "Turn around. Hands behind your back," Mercer ordered. Eliza didn't speak, didn't resist. She stepped back, rotated slowly, and placed her wrists behind her with robotic grace. The zip ties clicked too tightly. Pain flared through her wrists, but her expression never changed. Mercer climbed aboard Ocean Trace like he owned it. "Let's see what our commander's hiding," he said with a sneer. Inside, he pulled drawers, ripped through compartments, yanked out cables. He tossed Eliza's tools and emergency gear onto the dock like trash. He shattered the novice interface with a booted stomp, glass cracking like bone. Still, Eliza remained silent. Her knees burned against the dock. Her shoulders screamed beneath the strain of the restraints. Yet she never moved, never spoke. And from the corner of the harbor, the first civilian held up a phone and hit record. By the time Mercer flung the last piece of navigation hardware into the water, the crowd had doubled. Paddleboarders lingered near the edge of the harbor, watching from a distance. A marina worker stood still, half hidden behind a fuel shed. A woman in a service vest was already recording with her phone, her expression unreadable. Eliza Monroe knelt on the dock, zip ties digging into her skin, shoulders throbbing beneath the weight of silence. The broken remains of her mission were strewn across the planks, shards of technology, soaked equipment, her ID lying untouched near the edge of the boat. The novice system she had spent a year perfecting blinked its final blue pulse before fading to black. Her satchel had already vanished beneath the surface. Mercer crouched beside her, pressing a hand into her shoulder, his breath heavy with arrogance. Still not talking? No threats? No Navy lingo? No boyfriend coming to bail you out? She didn't answer. Her breathing remained steady. In and out. Measured. Intentional. She watched the reflection of the piling ripple in the water. Still waiting. Not for mercy. Not for understanding. For clarity. Nolan stood above her, still laughing. You really thought you'd slide in here with some fancy badge and no escort? Must be a special kind of crazy. Then Mercer reached for the dry storage bin. He pulled out a sealed metal case, one of the encrypted backups. Without a word, he heaved it overboard. The splash was deep and final. Seconds later, he did the same with the satchel. Oops, he muttered, grinning. Across the dock, the woman filming zoomed in. Her live stream was already climbing in views. Comments scrolled fast, angry, confused, speculative. Some demanded an explanation. Others accused Eliza of espionage. But most just watched. The kind of watching that did nothing. Mercer stood and cracked his neck. We've got time. Let's run a full secondary sweep. Nolan pulled out his radio. Dock 4 requesting backup. Female subject in breach. Refused verbal compliance. Situation under control. Copy that, the voice crackled back. Marine 8-1 en route. ETA 4 minutes. Mercer spat over the edge of the dock and leaned back against a piling. Let her stew. Maybe she'll remember who she really is. Eliza shifted slightly. Not in pain. Not to beg. She adjusted her weight, knees pressing harder into the wooden deck. Her face remained down, but her ears caught everything. The hum of the water, the clicks of boat ropes, the crackle of a second radio being turned on near the fuel station. Someone had called outside the chain of command. Then came the change. At first, it was just a sound, low engines growling against the morning stillness. Then the water split open as Marine 8-1 cut a sharp line across the harbor, its bow slicing forward without lights or sirens. On board were 2 men in tactical armor, gripping the rails, eyes locked on the scene ahead. The patrol unit reached the dock with precise force. Lines flew. Boots hit wood. Weapons were drawn. Hands where we can see them, barked the lead officer. Step away from the vessel. Mercer raised his palms, eyes wide. She's already restrained. We detained her for trespassing. The backup commander didn't lower his weapon. His eyes scanned the scene, the destroyed vessel, the torn equipment, the bound woman on her knees. He said nothing. Then he stepped forward. What's your name? Eliza lifted her chin, just slightly. I'm Eliza Monroe, she said. Captain, Naval Systems Command. The words were quiet, but the effect was thunderous. The younger of the backup officers blinked, squinting at the dock. His eyes caught the discarded ID card half buried beneath broken gear. He stooped, lifted it, turned it in his hand, then froze. He looked to his commanding officer and gave a single nod. Silence. Not the silence of tension. The silence of realization. The commanding officer stiffened, shoulders drawing back with controlled breath. Then, without hesitation, he lifted his right hand and delivered a crisp salute. Gasps broke through the crowd. The woman at the fueling station lowered her phone. The paddleboarders stood still in the water. From somewhere behind the fueling shed, a man muttered, "She's Navy." Mercer stepped back. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Nolan looked pale, his fingers twitching at his sides. One of the backup officers moved toward Eliza and knelt, blade out, cutting the zip ties with a quick motion. Her arms dropped to her sides. Red welts ringed her wrists, angry and raw. She didn't speak of the pain. She didn't have to. She stood slowly, brushed dust from her knees, and looked not at the crowd, nor the men who had arrested her. She turned instead to Ocean Trace, saw the shattered console, the open drawers, the soaked tools. Then she turned back to the tactical team. "Secure the perimeter," she said, voice clear. "Upload the vessel logs before they're corrupted." They obeyed without hesitation. No raised tone, no explanation, just a single sentence. And the command in her voice cracked through the morning like lightning. The crowd parted. The live feed continued, now not of her humiliation, but of her undeniable control. She had not shouted. She had not begged. She had only waited. And now, everything had changed. By noon that day, the first video clip had already made its way to 4 different platforms. 36 seconds of grainy footage, no commentary, no context, just a woman in uniform, zip-tied on a dock, as 2 harbor officers ransacked her vessel. Viewers couldn't hear her voice, but they saw everything else. The restraint, the silence, the moment her data case hit the water, the boot crushing the navigation system, and the 2 men laughing like no one was watching. But someone had been watching. Maya Reyes, the young mechanic who worked maintenance 2 slips over, had recognized Eliza's face. She remembered seeing her once, months ago, leading a seminar for naval recruits. Maya hadn't attended the seminar. She was just fixing a radio near the back of the hall. But Eliza had helped a struggling cadet without anyone noticing. She remembered thinking, that's real authority. And now she had just watched that same woman get thrown to the ground by 2 patrol officers who didn't bother to check her credentials. Maya hadn't just streamed the video. She clipped it, slowed it down, zoomed in on the ID tossed aside, and overlaid text. They didn't even look. It was raw, angry, honest, and it exploded. Within hours, national feeds picked it up. The story morphed from isolated misconduct to something bigger, something familiar. Audiences didn't know who Eliza Monroe was yet, but they knew that silence, that humiliation, that restraint. By nightfall, another video surfaced, this one with sound. It captured the exact moment when Marine 8-1 arrived, weapons drawn. It caught the silence before Eliza spoke. And then, her words, "I am Eliza Monroe, Captain, Naval Systems Command." A pause, a salute, and the shift. That footage hit harder. News anchors played it in slow motion, dissecting it frame by frame. Commentators debated use of force protocols. Advocacy groups called for immediate review. But behind the noise, a quieter current began to stir, an official one. At the Capitol, Senator Abigail Corwin of the Naval Oversight Committee saw the video before her team even briefed her. She didn't speak at first. She just stared at the moment of the salute, then nodded once and said, "We've seen enough." By 10 a.m. the next day, a classified directive was issued to the Office of Naval Integrity. The investigation was to begin immediately, led by Captain Dana Kessler, a woman known for her precision and intolerance for corruption. Dana was not political. She was not sentimental. She had dismantled whole battalions when given proof of abuse. Her first move was simple. She opened a file titled Classified Review, Valen Incident, and requested unfiltered access to every dock log, arrest record, complaint report, and personnel file tied to the past 2 years of activity at Valen Harbor. What she received stunned even her. Stacked within those records were dozens of complaints, some from junior officers, others from civilians like Maya, each citing misconduct, excessive force, improper detainment, and destruction of property. The pattern was unmistakable. Female detainees, credentials dismissed, reports sealed, cases closed by the same signature chain every time. At the top of that chain sat one name, Commander Veronica Shaw. Dana had known Shaw in passing. Cold, ambitious, meticulous in appearance, but evasive in accountability. At first, Shaw's responses to incidents seemed procedural. Insufficient evidence. No escalation. Recommend closure. But as Dana lined up report after report, she saw the truth. The complaints that had reached Shaw's desk didn't vanish. They were buried. In one archived email, dated 7 months earlier, Dana found a spark. It was brief, written by Shaw to a subordinate. It read, "If she resists, book her. If she doesn't, Book her anyway. Quiet her that way. That sentence broke the investigation wide open. Dana didn't issue statements. She didn't call press conferences. She worked in silence, pulling every thread. She contacted officers who had quietly resigned, looking for those who had tried to speak up. Many had been isolated. Others transferred under pressure. A few had left the service entirely. But now they answered. One former officer sent her a flash drive filled with screenshots, denied transfers, redacted requests for review, warning emails from superiors. Another offered access to her private journal, detailing a 6-month retaliation campaign after she questioned a supervisor's judgment during a detainment. A third said only, "I always wondered if someone would finally look." And now they were. At Valen Harbor, the energy shifted. Mercer and Nolan were benched under pending review, confined to administrative duty. They lingered at the edge of the fueling shed while the rest of their unit moved with anxious purpose. No one made eye contact. No one spoke to them. Then the real test arrived. A call came in from federal courthouse 9 miles inland. Armed breach. 2 guards down. Hostages confirmed. Suspect's identity unknown. Demands unclear. The harbor went into lockdown. Every available tactical unit scrambled to deploy. Inside the command van, chaos bloomed. Maps scattered. Radios overloaded. Tactical feeds jumped between static and infrared. Operators shouted over each other, searching for clarity, for structure, for someone to take control. And then Eliza stepped inside. She wore no armor, no insignia. Just her standard field jacket, sleeves rolled tight, hair pinned back. No one stopped her. No one asked for credentials. They moved aside without knowing why. She scanned the feeds once, picked up a plate carrier, slipped it on, walked to the communications console, and tapped mute. "He's bluffing," she said, calm and clear. "Look at his pacing. 12-second intervals. He's reading a list." The operator beside her blinked. "Who are you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed. Zoom on the left wrist. Removal scars from cuffs. Start with dishonorable discharges, military contractors. They ran the scan. Found a match. Jackson Miller, former transport specialist. Known instability. Eliza leaned into the microphone. "Jackson, you're surrounded," she said evenly. "No one's hurt yet. That's still your choice. Let them go." The room fell still. Officers froze mid-action. A senior coordinator paused mid-sentence. Everyone watched the feed. Jackson's shoulders shifted. One step, then another. The gun dropped. "Move in now," Eliza said. SWAT moved. No shots. No blood. Hostages emerged. The suspect surrendered. It ended in under 4 minutes. When she removed the headset, no one spoke. No one questioned. As she stepped outside, the wind caught the edge of her jacket. Dried blood still visible on the sleeves from her arrest, a silent scar across fabric and memory. Behind the shed, Mercer and Nolan stood watching. No arrogance now. No smirking. Just recognition of what they had tried to break and failed to even bend. The aftermath unfolded like a tidal shift, slow at first, then all at once. By the next morning, every major network had Eliza Monroe's name in their headlines. The footage from Valen Harbor had surpassed 5 million views. Not just the arrest, not just the salute, but the 4-minute courthouse resolution, now dubbed the quiet defusal. Analysts dissected her voice, her command, her posture. She hadn't raised it once. And yet, men with rifles had followed her orders without question. But while the media stormed forward, Eliza remained silent. She declined every interview request, ignored every op-ed. Her name trended globally, yet she refused to speak. There was nothing to clarify. The world had watched. That was enough. Captain Dana Kessler, however, was not done. With the internal investigation gaining traction, Dana requested broader access into enforcement structures beyond Valen. She cross-referenced complaints, arrest logs, and internal memos from 8 harbors along the eastern corridor. What she discovered sent a chill down her spine. The same pattern, same language in reports, same dismissal phrases. Risk minimal, recommend closure, not mission relevant, and always, somewhere near the top of the signature chain, Commander Veronica Shaw. The network Shaw had built wasn't accidental. It was systemic. Officers who questioned her were quietly reassigned. Complaints that reached her desk were sealed, rerouted, or quietly deleted. Those who pushed too hard found their careers stalled, their clearances revoked, or their reputations quietly eroded from within. Dana brought her findings to the Office of Naval Oversight. The response was swift. A closed-door hearing was scheduled. Internal Affairs opened 23 new case files. Witnesses were quietly contacted. Digital archives were restored from backup, revealing tampered documents and scrub footage. The evidence was no longer a trickle. It was a flood. And yet, Shaw remained elusive. Publicly, she appeared unshaken. No statement, no denial, just an unspoken confidence that the system would protect her the way it always had. But she hadn't accounted for the leaks. 3 days after Dana filed her preliminary report, an anonymous source released a cache of redacted files to the press. Included was the email: "If she resists, book her. If she doesn't, book her anyway." The reaction was immediate. Furious. Nationwide, protesters appeared outside Shaw's regional headquarters with signs that read, "Silence isn't submission," and "We saw everything." The Navy issued a rare public statement. Not a full confession, but a promise. Investigations were underway. Accountability would follow. Structural reviews had begun. And still, Eliza Monroe said nothing. Instead, she returned to Rockshore Naval Quarters and resumed her post without fanfare. Her office remained dimly lit, her presence quiet but undeniable. Recruits walked differently when she passed. Junior officers stood taller in her shadow. Rumors circled that she had been offered a promotion but turned it down. Others said she was writing a classified report on the novice test, an analysis not of hardware, but of human systems under stress. Those closest to her noticed the change in her eyes, sharper, perhaps, but also more distant. She had passed a test no one could have prepared her for, and she had done it without breaking. But the story hadn't ended. Not for everyone. Maya Reyes, the young mechanic who had recorded the first clip, had gone viral in her own right. She was now giving interviews, speaking at cadet events, quoted by journalists. She always said the same thing: "I didn't save her. She saved herself. I just made sure no one could pretend it didn't happen." Then came the moment no one expected: an unannounced press conference. Senator Abigail Corwin stood at the podium in a navy blazer with silver trim. Her face was pale but resolute. Flanked by naval oversight officials, she held up a framed image of Eliza Monroe, taken 3 years prior to System Summit, standing beside a younger cadet with a hand on their shoulder. "This is not just about one officer," she said. "It is about what we allowed to harden into habit. We owe her more than acknowledgement. We owe her change." Behind the cameras, in the wings of the press room, Dana Kessler stood silently. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just listened. The work had cost her sleep, friendships, trust in the institution she had devoted her life to. But she had done it, and she knew, deep down, she had only gotten this far because Eliza hadn't fought back that morning. She had waited. Eliza's restraint had been the key. The refusal to rise, to escalate, to play the part they expected her to play. She had let them expose themselves, their patterns, their disregard. And now, the world could not look away. Later that evening, long after the press conference had ended, Eliza walked alone through the harbor. The water was calm, the sky painted in streaks of indigo and fire. She passed Dock 4. It had been cleared, repaired, and cleaned since the incident, but something lingered, an echo in the wood, a weight in the air. She stopped at the edge and stared down at the rippling water. Somewhere below, her satchel still rested on the seafloor. Along with it, the destroy drives, the compass, pieces of a mission that would never be recovered. But she didn't reach for them. She didn't need to. What she had surfaced instead was far more valuable. Her name, her silence, her command. 3 months passed. Ocean Trace drifted silently beyond the breakwater, the sea like glass beneath her hull. The sky above was painted with wide strokes of gold and gray, clouds hovering without wind, as if the air itself held its breath. Captain Eliza Monroe sat near the stern, coiling rope with steady hands, her jacket folded beside her. Her sleeves were rolled up to the elbows, the faint marks on her wrists barely visible now, faded but not gone. They never would be. Across from her, her 8-year-old niece sat on a bench with her legs swinging above the water, a small fishing rod in her lap, her expression one of careful attention. Her older sister, Caroline, sat at the bow, humming a familiar tune Eliza hadn't heard in years. The moment was quiet, undisturbed, almost untouched by the world that had once tried to break her. The line tugged suddenly. The girl gasped. "I've got something," she cried, gripping the rod with both hands. Eliza smiled faintly, rose with slow ease, and moved beside her. She guided the girl's fingers gently, showing her how to hold, how to pull, how to let the water speak through the line. "Let it pull," she said softly, "then ease it in." Together, they reeled in a small silver fish, slick and shining in the morning light. The girl whooped with joy as Eliza removed the hook with care, held the fish for one final look, and released it back into the deep. For a moment, they both watched it vanish. Then the girl asked, "Why do you like being on the boat so much?" Eliza didn't answer right away. She looked around, at the endless water, the rising sun, the steady silence between them. "Because it's honest," she finally said. "It doesn't care who you are, only how you move." The girl didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway, content with the answer. They stayed out until the horizon touched the sun. Eliza adjusted the ropes one last time, then turned Ocean Trace toward home, letting the boat glide on its own. There was no ceremony waiting, no formal return, no medals, but she didn't need those. Because elsewhere, the impact of her silence still moved beneath the surface like a slow, unstoppable tide. In Washington, Dana Kessler stood at the threshold of a new commission, an independent naval review board, one she had helped build from the ground up. Internal Affairs had restructured 3 enforcement units. Commander Veronica Shaw had resigned under quiet pressure, her name never appearing in the headlines, but her absence was unmistakable. But Dana wasn't finished. She was drafting new ethics standards for coastal operations, working with civilian advisors, creating public accountability channels. Her name appeared in articles, but she rarely gave interviews. When asked to inspire the overhaul, she always answered with the same words. Someone who knew how to listen when everyone else was shouting. Maya Reyes, once a quiet mechanic, now worked on the Oversight Advisory Board for Valen Harbor. She still wore grease on her hands and kept her hair tied back with an old bandana. But she was no longer invisible. Her voice carried weight, not because she shouted, but because she had been willing to speak when it mattered. And everywhere across the country, the image of a woman kneeling on a dock, silent, restrained, enduring, remained a symbol, not of defeat, but of power. A power that didn't depend on shouting orders. A power that didn't demand applause. Eliza Monroe never made another public statement. She never corrected the narratives, never clarified the rumors, never stepped in front of a camera to take credit. She didn't need to. The systems had been tested. Novice, the institution, the chain of command, the people. And they had failed until she took control. That had always been the mission. Not to be seen, to reveal what was hidden. And in the end, her silence had spoken louder than any force ever could. She adjusted the wheel, turned Ocean Trace into the current, and disappeared quietly into the sun. The water has always listened.